Chapter 6. Berserkers and the Madness of War. The first snow has fallen, and with it comes a visitor to your settlement. He arrives alone, walking out of the swirling white like an apparition. He's massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders like an ox and arms thick with muscle and scars. But it's his eyes that make your blood run cold. They're not quite focused, not quite sane. There's something wrong behind them, something feral and dangerous. Bjorn Berserker, the Jarl greets him with cautious respect. You honor us with your presence. The giant man doesn't respond with words. He grunts, his eyes scanning the settlement like a predator assessing prey. This is a berserker. You've heard stories, but seeing one in person is different, terrifying. Berserkers are a special class of warriors, men who fight in a trance-like fury that makes them nearly unstoppable. They're said to feel no pain, to fight with superhuman strength, to be immune to fire and iron. They're also said to be barely human, more animal than man, dangerous even to their allies. Bjorn is given food and shelter, but you notice people keep their distance. Even the Jarl, who fears nothing, treats him with wary respect. That evening, you gather with others around the fire, and Olaf tells you about berserkers. They're touched by Odin, he explains in a low voice. The All-Father gives them his fury, his battle madness. In exchange, they give up part of their humanity. They can channel the rage of bears or wolves, fighting with animal strength and savagery. How do they do it, you ask? Olaf shrugs. Some say it's magic. Some say it's certain mushrooms or herbs they consume before battle. Some say it's just something in them, something broken that lets them become pure rage. You learn more over the following days as Bjorn stays with the settlement. He's been hired by the Jarl for next season's raids. Berserkers are expensive, but they're worth it in battle. Bjorn barely speaks. He eats enormous quantities of food, seemingly never full. He spends hours each day exercising, pushing his body to limits that would break normal men. And every few days he disappears into the forest and doesn't return until nightfall, his clothing torn, his body covered in scratches and bruises as if he's been fighting invisible enemies. One of the other warriors, a man named Harold, fought alongside berserkers before. He tells you what it's like. Before the battle they start to change, he says, his voice hushed. They shake and shiver, even if it's not cold. They bite their shields. They howl like wolves or roar like bears. Their eyes roll back. They foam at the mouth. He pauses, remembering. Then the battle starts and they charge. They don't use shields, don't wear armor. They just attack with axes or swords, screaming, cutting down anyone in their path. Friend or foe, it doesn't matter. You stay away from them when they're in the rage. Do they really feel no pain, you ask? I saw a berserker take an arrow in the shoulder, didn't even flinch, kept fighting. Saw another get his hand cut off, looked at the stump, and just roared louder, and kept swinging his sword with his remaining hand. It's like pain doesn't register, or they don't care. What happens after? Harold's expression darkens. That's the dangerous part. After the battle, the rage doesn't just stop. It takes time to come down. I've seen berserkers attack their own people when they're coming out of it, still seeing enemies everywhere. That's why you give them space. You don't approach them until they've calmed down fully. You have a chance to observe Bjorn training, and it's disturbing. He's in the practice area, attacking a wooden post with an axe. But he's not just practicing technique, he's working himself into a frenzy. His movements become faster, more violent. He starts growling, then howling. His face contorts into something that barely looks human. Suddenly, he drops the axe and attacks the post with his bare hands, punching it over and over until his knuckles are bleeding. He doesn't seem to notice or care. Other warriors are watching, and they're not impressed in a good way. They're frightened. Unnatural, one mutters. Men shouldn't be like that. But useful, another counters. In battle you want him on your side. Eventually Bjorn collapses, exhausted, panting like an animal. He lies in the snow for nearly an hour before he's recovered enough to stand. Later, you gather the courage to approach him. He's sitting alone, as usual, eating dried meat. Can I ask you something? You say tentatively. He looks at you with those unsettling eyes but doesn't object. What's it like? The rage, I mean. For a long moment, he doesn't answer. Then, surprisingly, he speaks. His voice is rough, as if not used often. It's like drowning, he says slowly. Like going underwater. Everything becomes distant, muffled. Then there's just red and rage, and the need to destroy. I don't remember most of it. Just fragments. Blood. Screaming. The feel of bones breaking under my hands. He tears off another chunk of meat with his teeth. Afterward, I'm empty, hollow, like something vital has been burnt out of me, and I'm tired, so tired, but also free. For those moments in the rage, nothing matters. No pain, no fear, no thought, just action. Is it worth it? Living like that? Bjorn's laugh is bitter. I don't live like this, I exist like this. Most men fear death. I fear the moments between battles, the times when I'm this. He gestures at himself with disgust. The rage is the only time I feel alive, the only time I feel anything. It's a chilling confession. Berserkers, you realize, aren't blessed by Odin, they're cursed. Whatever allows them to fight with such fury also takes something essential from them, leaving them as broken men who can only truly function in violence. You learn that berserkers often don't live long, they die young in battle, which they seem to prefer. Or they die by their own hand when the weight of existence between rages becomes too much, and they're feared as much as respected. Many communities won't allow berserkers to settle permanently. They're too dangerous, too unpredictable. They're hired for raids and battles, then sent away. As winter deepens, you witness another aspect of Viking warfare that's equally disturbing: the preparation of young men for their first battle. A group of teenage boys, maybe 14 to 17 years old, are being trained. Not just in weapon skills, but in the psychology of killing. The training is brutal. They're woken before dawn, made to exercise until they're exhausted, then trained in combat techniques. They practice with spears, axes, swords, shields. They wrestle, they run, but they're also subjected to psychological conditioning. One exercise involves killing animals. Each boy is given a sheep or pig, and told to kill it with a knife, not quickly and mercifully, but slowly, getting used to the feel of a blade entering flesh, the sound of screaming, the smell of blood and bowels. Some boys hesitate, show squeamishness. They're mocked mercilessly, called women, told they're worthless. The social pressure is immense. By the end of the exercise, every boy has killed his animal. Some are vomiting, others are crying quietly where they think no one can see. But they've crossed a threshold. They've learned that they can kill. The veterans training them explain the psychology. In battle, you have maybe a second to decide, kill or be killed, says a scarred warrior named Thorgrim. If you hesitate because you've never taken a life, you die. We're teaching you to act without thinking, to override the natural reluctance to kill. The boys are also taught to dehumanize their future enemies. Christians are weak, they're told. They pray to a dying god and turn the other cheek. They're sheep waiting to be slaughtered. You're not killing men. You're harvesting wealth that weak fools have failed to defend. This kind of indoctrination is systematic. By the time these boys go on their first raid, they've been conditioned to see their enemies as less than human, to override moral qualms, and to kill without hesitation. You watch this training with growing horror. These are children being turned into killers, and everyone sees it as necessary, normal, good. Would you rather send them unprepared and watch them die? Olaf asks when you express discomfort. This is mercy. We're giving them the tools to survive. Maybe he's right. In a culture where violence is inevitable, maybe preparing young people for it is practical, but it still feels like something precious is being taken from these boys, some innocence that can never be recovered. One evening, you're helping prepare weapons for next season's raids. Swords are being sharpened, axe heads fitted to new hafts, spears checked for cracks or weaknesses. As you work, the men discuss battle tactics and share their philosophies of war. The key is the first strike, says one veteran. Hit hard, hit fast, break their will immediately. If they stand and fight, the battle is harder. If they run, you can cut them down easily. Fear is your greatest weapon, another adds. That's why we scream when we attack, why we make ourselves look fierce. Half the battle is won before a blow is struck if your enemy is already afraid. What about honor? Asks one of the younger men. The skalds sing of honorable combat, warriors facing each other in fair fights. The veterans laugh at this. Honor is for skalds and stories, Thorgrim says bluntly. In real battle, there's no honor. There's only winning or dying. You use every advantage. You attack from behind. You outnumber your enemy. You show no mercy, because they won't show you any. But what about single combat? Duels, the young man persists. Holmgang, ritual duels, those have rules, Thorgrim concedes. But that's not war, that's law settling. In war, forget everything you've heard about honorable combat. The only honorable outcome is victory. This practical brutality is the reality of Viking warfare. The sagas and poems glorify individual heroism and honorable deeds, but the men who actually fight know better. War is ugly, brutal, and amoral. You ask about the worst battle they've experienced, and the mood becomes somber. Hufsfjord, says an old warrior named Kettle. King Harald's unification war. I was young, maybe 20. Both sides had thousands of men. Shield walls crashed together, and it was just slaughter. Men crushed together so tight, you couldn't swing a sword properly. Standing on the dead and dying, the screaming, the smell. He's quiet for a moment. A man next to me took a spear in the throat. Blood sprayed in my face. He tried to talk, to say something, but just made gurgling sounds. He died standing up, held upright by the press of bodies. We couldn't even let him fall until the lines shifted. How do you deal with that, you ask? Afterward, I mean. How do you live with what you've seen and done? Kettle shrugs. You don't. Not really. Part of you stays on that battlefield forever. The rest of you comes home and pretends to be normal. You drink mead and tell stories and laugh.
But inside, you're still there, standing in blood that's ankle deep, surrounded by screaming and dying. Another veteran nods. That's why so many warriors seek death in battle eventually. Not because they're eager to go to Valhalla, though we tell ourselves that, but because the weight of survival becomes too heavy. It's easier to die gloriously than to live with the memories. This is the unspoken cost of Viking culture. It glorifies violence and warfare, but the psychological toll on those who survive is immense. They have no concept of post-traumatic stress, no therapy, no support systems. Warriors who are broken by what they've experienced are just expected to continue, to be strong, to not show weakness. Some turn to alcohol, drinking themselves into oblivion regularly. Others become increasingly violent and unstable. And some, like Berserkers, find ways to channel their trauma into even more effective killing, perpetuating the cycle. As winter drags on, you witness the dark side of this warrior culture. A man named Ulf, a veteran of many raids, starts having what we would recognize as PTSD episodes. He wakes screaming from nightmares. He's easily startled, sometimes lashing out violently when surprised. He's unable to focus on normal work, constantly agitated. His family and neighbors don't understand what's wrong with him. Some whisper that he's been cursed. Others suggest he's possessed by a malevolent spirit. A few, more charitably, say he's battle-weary and needs rest, but the community can't support a man who isn't contributing. Ulf's behavior becomes more erratic. He gets into fights. He neglects his responsibilities. Finally, tragically, he walks out into a snowstorm one night and doesn't return. They find his body 3 days later, frozen. Whether he got lost in the storm or whether it was intentional suicide, no one can say. His death is mourned, but there's also a sense of relief. He'd become dangerous, unpredictable. His death, while sad, solves a problem the community didn't know how to address. This is what happens to warriors who can't cope. Without psychological support, without understanding of trauma, they're left to suffer alone, and often they don't survive. Bjorn the Berserker is still with the settlement, and you notice he watches Ulf's decline with something like recognition in his eyes. One day he makes a rare comment. He saw too much. Bjorn says simply, killed too much. It broke something in him. Better for him to die than to live broken. Couldn't he have been helped, you ask? Bjorn looks at you with those dead eyes. How? By talking, by resting. Some things can't be fixed. War changes you. If you're lucky, it makes you harder, stronger. If you're unlucky, it makes you like him, or like me. It's a damning assessment of what Viking culture does to its warriors. It uses them up, breaks them down, and then discards them when they're no longer functional. As spring approaches and the ice begins to break up in the fjord, preparations for the raiding season intensify. Ships are readied, weapons are finished. The young men who've been training all winter are deemed ready for their first raid, and Bjorn begins his pre-battle preparations. You watch, fascinated and horrified, as he goes through his ritual. For 3 days he barely eats, just drinks water and consumes something, mushrooms you think, that alter his state of mind. He meditates for hours, working himself into a focused rage. He mutilates himself, cutting shallow wounds into his arms and chest, seemingly testing his pain tolerance. On the 3rd day he begins the final preparation. He strips naked and wraps himself in a bearskin. For the rest of the day and into the night, he doesn't speak, doesn't eat, just sits in the bearskin, becoming the bear. The other warriors give him a wide berth. Even the Jarl looks nervous. This is what Berserkers do before battle. They transform themselves, shedding their humanity and becoming animals, bears or wolves, creatures of pure instinct and rage. By the time the ships are ready to launch, Bjorn is in an altered state. His eyes are wild. He's twitching and shaking. He bites his shield, leaving teeth marks in the wood. He growls and snarls like the bear whose skin he wears. He's terrifying, and he's on your side. You're about to go on another raid, and this time, you'll see what a berserker does in battle. You'll witness the full horror of Viking warfare with all its fury and madness. The ships launch at dawn, heading west toward the coast of Scotland. There are rumors of a wealthy monastery there, poorly defended, ripe for plundering. During the voyage, the young men going on their first raid are excited, nervous, eager to prove themselves. The veterans are quiet, focused, checking their equipment and mentally preparing, and Bjorn sits in the prow of the ship, wrapped in his bearskin, occasionally letting out sounds that are more animal than human. When you finally sight land and row toward the coast, the attack plan is laid out. Fast approach, overwhelming force, maximum terror, standard Viking tactics. The ship's beach, warriors pour out. The monastery is small, maybe 20 monks, no defenses to speak of. What happens next is a whirlwind of violence. The warriors charge, screaming, weapons raised. The monks scatter in terror. Some try to run, others fall to their knees and pray. A few, braver or more foolish, try to resist with whatever they can grab. Wooden staffs, cooking implements, bare hands. They're cut down without mercy. But the warriors' violence, brutal as it is, pales in comparison to what Bjorn does. The Berserker doesn't charge with the others. He moves on his own, slightly apart. His movements are strange, jerky, almost like he's dancing or having a seizure. Then he sees his first victim, a young monk trying to flee. Bjorn catches him in 3 long strides. What follows is not combat, it's butchery. He doesn't just kill the monk, he tears him apart with his bare hands and an axe, roaring, covered in blood, completely lost in his rage. The monk's screams are cut short, his body is left in pieces. Bjorn moves on to the next victim, and the next. He's not discriminating, not thinking. Anyone he sees, he attacks with that same berserk fury. Even the other Vikings give him space. One warrior gets too close, and Bjorn almost attacks him too before some last shred of recognition stops him. You're frozen, watching this display of unleashed violence. This is what Berserkers are. This is the fury of Odin made flesh. It's effective, but it's also monstrous. The raid is over in minutes. The monastery is looted. Survivors are rounded up for slavery. Bodies of the dead are left where they fell. And Bjorn stands in the center of the carnage, covered head to toe in blood, some of it his own from wounds he doesn't seem to have noticed, still in the grip of his rage. It takes hours for him to come down. The other warriors keep their distance, setting up camp, but staying far from the Berserker. Gradually, his breathing slows, the wild look in his eyes fades, he collapses, exhausted. He finally wakes. Hours later, he seems confused, disoriented. He looks at his blood-covered hands like he doesn't recognize them. He sees the carnage around him, and shows no emotion. No pride, no remorse, no reaction at all, just emptiness. This is what being a berserker means. Moments of pure, effective violence, followed by complete dissociation and exhaustion. It's a weapon that destroys its wielder as surely as it destroys enemies. The young warriors on their first raid are shaken. They killed men today, looted, burned. But what Bjorn did was something else entirely, something that showed them there are levels of violence that go beyond warfare into something primal and terrifying. That night around the campfire, the mood is strange. There's celebration over the successful raid, but it's muted. The Berserker's display has unsettled everyone. One of the young warriors who killed his first man today is vomiting behind a tree. Another sits staring into the fire, his hands shaking. The veteran warriors mostly ignore this, remembering their own first times. But you notice something else. The young men who seemed most affected by the violence, most disturbed by what they did, are also the ones being mocked by their peers. Thorstein puked after his first kill. Someone laughs. Like a woman, the social pressure is immense. Show weakness, show conscience, and you're ridiculed. The only acceptable response is to embrace the violence, to revel in it, or at least to pretend you do. So Thorstein wipes his mouth and returns to the fire, forcing a smile, joining in the boasting and storytelling. But you can see in his eyes that something has broken inside him. He's killed today, and whether he admits it or not, it's changed him forever. Over the next several weeks you participate in multiple raids along the Scottish coast. Each one follows a similar pattern. Arrive at dawn, overwhelm through speed and surprise, loot everything of value, kill or enslave the population, burn what's left, and depart before any organized resistance can arrive. You're getting better at it, more efficient. And that thought horrifies you, even as it occurs. You're becoming what they are. The shock is wearing off. The killing is becoming routine. During one raid, you personally kill a man. He's trying to protect his family, swinging a farming tool at you. You react without thinking, your spear taking him in the chest. He goes down, blood bubbling from his mouth, and you stand over him as he dies. His wife is screaming, his children are crying, and all you can think is, at least it was quick, at least he didn't suffer long. That night, you can't sleep. You keep seeing his face, hearing his family's screams, but you also know you had no choice. It was him or you. And in this world, that's all that matters. The veterans notice your distress. Olaf sits with you, offering a horn of mead. First time killing a man face to face, he asks, though he already knows the answer. You nod. It gets easier, he says, though his tone suggests that might not be a good thing. The first one, you remember forever. The second, almost as well. By the 10th, they start to blur together. By the 100th, he trails off, staring into the darkness. How many have you killed, you ask? He's quiet for a long moment. I stopped counting after 50. That was 20 years ago. You try to imagine that. 50 men, maybe more, all dead by his hand. How does someone carry that weight? Do you regret any of them? Olaf considers the question seriously. The ones who were fighting me? No, that's war. It's what we do. But there were others. Women, children, people who couldn't fight back. Those, he takes a long drink. Those are harder to live with, but I tell myself I had no choice. I was following orders, protecting my crew, doing what needed to be done. You tell yourself these things enough times, you start to believe them. This is the psychological cost of Viking raiding, the mental gymnastics required to justify violence against innocents, the gradual numbing that happens as killing becomes routine. The stories you tell yourself to avoid facing what you've become. The raiding season continues through the summer. You visit Ireland, northern England, even make a daring raid on a Frankish town. Each raid brings silver, slaves and blood. The holds of the longships fill with plunder. The chain of captives grows longer. Björn the Berserker proves his worth again and again. In every battle he's unleashed like a weapon, and he cuts through enemies with terrifying efficiency. But between battles he becomes more withdrawn, more hollow. The rage is consuming him from the inside. During one raid, something goes wrong. You're attacking a fortified monastery that turns out to have hired mercenaries for protection. What should have been an easy raid becomes a real battle. The mercenaries are experienced warriors, not monks or peasants. They form a shield wall and fight back effectively. The Vikings are forced into a grinding, bloody melee. This is where you see the difference between raiding and real warfare. Against unprepared civilians, Vikings are unstoppable, but against trained, equipped, organized warriors, the fight is even. Men die on both sides. The screaming is constant. The clash of weapons echoes off the monastery walls. You're in the shield wall, pressed shoulder to shoulder with other warriors. An enemy soldier is directly in front of you, trying to stab through the gaps in the shields. You stab back. It's not heroic or glorious, it's terrifying and exhausting. The man next to you takes a spear in the eye and goes down. Another Viking steps over his body to fill the gap. The shield wall can't break or everyone dies. Bjorn is somewhere in the chaos. You can hear his roaring, but even a berserker can't single-handedly turn a battle against disciplined opponents. The fight lasts for over an hour, an eternity in combat. Your arm is burning from holding your shield. Your legs are shaking from the strain. You're covered in blood, some yours, mostly others. Finally, the mercenaries begin to fall back. They're outnumbered and can't sustain the fight. They retreat into the monastery's stone church and barricade the doors. The Jarl makes a quick decision. Take what we can carry and go. We don't have time to besiege them. It's a tactical withdrawal, not a defeat, but it feels like one. Several Vikings are dead, many more wounded. The plunder from this raid won't be worth the losses. As you carry the wounded back to the ships, you pass one of the young warriors from your settlement. He's lying against a wall, his intestines spilling from a terrible wound in his abdomen. He's still alive, conscious, looking at his own guts with disbelief. "Mother," he whispers, "I want my mother." He's maybe 16 years old. This was his second raid. There's nothing anyone can do for him. The wound is mortal. One of the veterans, showing mercy, cuts his throat quickly. It's kinder than letting him die slowly. His body is carried to the ship. He'll be buried at sea with honors. A warrior's funeral, but you can't help thinking, he died screaming for his mother, hundreds of miles from home, for a handful of silver that his family will receive as compensation. This is the reality of Viking warfare. Not all glory and riches. Sometimes it's young men dying in agony in foreign lands, their last thoughts of home and family they'll never see again. Back on the ships, rowing away from Scotland, the mood is somber. The wounded moan, the dead are wrapped in sailcloth, and the warriors who survived intact are subdued. Realizing how close they came to joining their fallen comrades, Björn is in an especially bad state. He took multiple wounds during the battle, though he didn't notice them until the rage wore off. Now he's barely conscious, feverish, his wounds showing early signs of infection. The ship's healer, an old woman who travels with the fleet, tends to him. She washes the wounds with mead, applies poultices made from herbs, and chants healing prayers. Whether he survives is up to the gods now. The berserker rage keeps them alive during battle, she explains as she works. They feel no pain, so they fight through wounds that would stop normal men. But afterward the body realizes what's happened. Sometimes it's too much. Björn survives, but barely. By the time the fleet returns to Norway, he's a shadow of himself. The wounds heal, but something in him seems broken. The toll of years of berserking has finally caught up with him. He disappears one night, walking into the mountains. No one goes after him. Everyone knows what he's doing. Berserkers, when they know they can't fight anymore, often seek death on their own terms. Better to die in the wilderness, maybe fighting a bear or a wolf, than to waste away in a longhouse. His bearskin is found a week later by hunters. There's no sign of Bjorn's body, but there's a lot of blood on the ground, and signs of a struggle. Whatever death he found, he fought for it. That's the berserker way. The raiding season ends. The fleet returns home with ships full of plunder and slaves. It's been a successful season by Viking standards. Many warriors are wealthier than when they left. The settlements will prosper from the influx of silver and goods. But the cost is counted in bodies. 15 men dead, dozens wounded, some crippled for life, and those are just the physical casualties. Every man who went raiding returns changed, hardened, carrying new memories of violence that will haunt their dreams. The young warriors who survived their first season are now veterans. The boy who vomited after his first kill now jokes about the raid over mead. He's learned to suppress whatever conscience he had, learned to be what Viking culture demands, a killer without remorse. And you've killed multiple people now. You've participated in raids that destroyed communities, ended lives, enslaved innocents. You've watched berserkers tear people apart. You've stood in shield walls and stabbed at faces you couldn't even see clearly. You're a Viking now, not by choice but by circumstance and survival.
And you're not sure if you can live with what that means. As winter approaches again, and the ships are pulled up onto the beach for the season, you have time to reflect on everything you've witnessed. The violence, the religion, the social structures, all of it built on a foundation of brutality. Viking culture glorifies warriors, but it destroys them in the process. It creates berserkers, then discards them when they're used up. It sends young men to die far from home. It treats violence as normal, even noble, and underlying it all is the simple truth. This is a society of raiders and slavers. They survive by taking from others, by violence and theft. The silver in the Jarl's hoard, the thralls working in the longhouse, all of it bought with blood. The sagas will sing of heroes and glorious deeds. The poets will craft kennings about brave warriors and honorable combat, but you've seen the truth behind the legend.
War isn't glorious. It's young men dying in agony, calling for their mothers. It's berserkers driven mad by years of battle rage. It's the hollow eyes of veterans who've killed so many times they've stopped seeing their victims as human. This is the Viking Age, and now you understand why it ended. Not because the Vikings were defeated militarily, but because this way of life is ultimately unsustainable. A culture built on violence and plunder can only last so long before it exhausts itself. But for now, in this time and place, this is how things are, and you're part of it, whether you want to be or not. As you settle into the longhouse for another winter, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle, you know that when spring comes, you'll likely do it all again, because that's what Vikings do. They raid, they fight, they kill, and they tell themselves it's glorious.